Have you ever noticed how fast time can pass by when you're really busy, and how painfully slow time passes when you're stuck in traffic? Of course, we're all familiar with those situations. Well, one of the most common pieces of advice grieving people hear from other folks is just stay busy. The idea is that we can avoid some of the pain of grieving by not giving ourselves time to be focused on our loss. Genius, right? Well, maybe not. Most health professionals, of course, see being reasonably active as a healthy habit. But is just staying busy good advice for a griever? Not sure? Well, how about you and I examine this question a little closer together? Sure, there is a healthy logic in staying reasonably active. Sitting around with nothing to do can potentially lead to feeling useless, lonely, and hopeless. But filling up our days and nights with activity to avoid pain may also have some unintended negative effects. Consider this real-life example. Recently, in my role as a therapist, I worked with a woman who had recently lost her husband. I'm going to call her Arlene. Arlene told me of the grief she felt, as she also told me about her husband. She described a man who adored her, who made her feel like the center of his universe, who was a great provider, and he was full of life and fun. Then, unexpectedly, he was diagnosed with a fatal disease, and he faced it bravely. But far more quickly than was expected, he was gone, and she was left devastated. Arlene's misery first motivated her to seek healing. She started spending her days reading self-help books. After a dozen books read in just a few weeks, she realized something important. While she was learning a lot of facts, and being busy distracted her from her pain, she wasn't gaining any knowledge that was making her feel better. So she backed away from her incessant reading and study, which meant she wasn't constantly busy all the time. And as a result, she began feeling the pain of her loss so much more poignantly, because her mind was not occupied elsewhere. So she thought it best to go back to work earlier than she had planned in order to fill in her daytime hours. Work indeed kept her busy, but when her workday ended and she pulled her car into the driveway, all her feelings of hopelessness and loneliness met her at the front door. Being a problem solver, she reckoned, I just need to focus on something to do. I don't want to focus on my sadness and pain. She fashioned together a simple plan to keep herself busy at home until bedtime. Here's what she did. Might sound familiar to you. To keep herself busy, she watched TV. She binged, along with a glass of wine or two, until she began dozing off, and then traipsed off to bed, or maybe she slept on the sofa even. Well, soon enough, Arlene tired of that routine and looked for another way to spend her evenings. She started spending most evenings out with her friends, eating dinner and then drinking until late. The social time was great, for keeping her mind off her loss anyway. Of course, as you might guess, that approach could only be maintained for so long. The frequency of social gathering diminished, and her consciousness of pain returned. Not to be thwarted, she started planning trips with friends. She greatly enjoyed dreaming about the next trip, making the travel plans, and then the freedom and novelty of staying in new places with her friends was just outstanding. However, just as her previous strategies weren't sustainable, so was her passion for traveling taken away. Once again, she was faced with her grief and difficult emotions. Okay, time out. You get the point. Let's stop here for a moment and examine what Arlene was up to. What was she doing actually? What she was really doing with her reading, her working, socializing, and traveling was practicing avoidance. Avoiding our grief is something like finding hiding places. At first, we feel a sort of relief as we crowd out and suppress our difficult thoughts and feelings. But it doesn't help to hide, because the moment you come out of that hiding place, you'll find your unresolved pain waiting patiently for you. We can't escape our pain by avoiding it, folks. We can't heal by dodging or numbing our pain. Rather, we simply postpone what we inevitably need to do, which is acknowledge, examine, and express our pain outwardly. Maybe you relate to Arlene's story. Most grievers have tried out the busyness technique only to find that at some point they can't keep taking the same approach, and nothing is healed as a result. Okay, I'm going to wrap up this episode. The main points of this episode that I think are worth thinking about are the following. First, keeping busy isn't a viable strategy for healing. Staying busy to avoid pain is just a postponement of the inevitable. The pain of grieving must be acknowledged, examined, and expressed. I'd like to leave you a stepping stone towards healing. If you find yourself filling in most every moment of your day, ask yourself this question. What would it be like if I gave myself the gift of resting, thinking about my loss, and journaling my thoughts during this season of mourning? And then consider giving it a try. How will you feel afterward? I hope you find out. Finally, a reflection. Here's what I wrote for today. Those who avoid, who block or try to hide from their pain eventually realize that painful emotions reside within us, and they demand recognition and expression. These thoughts and feelings can never be extinguished other than by facing them, and as I said before, examining them and then speaking of them. Well, thank you again for tuning in today. I hope this episode was helpful to you in some way, shape, or fashion. I look forward to speaking with you again in the future. Be well.